Thanks for checking out this video. So this is the final regular year installment of the 1980s horror movie superlative series that I'm doing with your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete. This is 1989, but just know that we will also have an overall video coming after this one, the week after this one, which we take all the picks for each of the categories that we personally did, and we use that pool to come up with our overall for the entire decade of 1980, or of the 1980s. So should be a lot of fun, but I'll tell you, I already started to work on it. It is tough. So watch this video to round this out. Go to your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete's channel and watch his video for his 1989 picks. His channel's linked in my description. Then come back to my channel, go to the community tab, and vote in our poll on whoever you think had either the best picks, the ones that lined up with your personal picks the most, or had the best justifications for their picks. Whatever makes the most sense to you. But all that said, let's go ahead and get into the actual superlatives here. For most amazing, I have a review for this on my channel, and I just gushed and gushed and gushed about this film, which is why it's my most amazing for 1989. Potentially, this is my personal opinion, potentially the best horror comedy ever made, The Burbs. And I'm actually wearing a Burb. You can see it down there. The Burbs is from Fright Rags. A new acquisition of mine for my birthday. But The Burbs, wonderful. I mean, Tom Hanks, obviously a very seasoned, wonderful actor. Horror comedy to the max. I mean, it's a lot more comedy, obviously, but there are horror elements to it. This film actually scared the hell out of me when I was a young kid. I think I was like 5 or 6 years old when I first saw it. And the part where they revealed the bones in the trunk of the Klopex, and then the initial, or the main Klopek is going after Tom Hanks's character. I just, like, it was pure horror for me as a child, and I had nightmares. I literally had nightmares. I had the pleasure of meeting virtually Joe Dante, who made this film, and I let him know that it was the first film to ever give me nightmares in my lifetime, and he thought that was really funny, so I'm glad I was able to tell him that and give him a good chuckle. But the comedy is so good in this. Bruce Dern's character in particular is kind of like the gun nuts militant guy in the neighborhood, who's extremely helpful, though. One of my favorites, probably my favorite. His whole battle that he has with the dog. I think the dog's name is Cookie. It's been a little bit since I watched it, like about a year at this point, but so fun, so wonderful. It feels like you're actually in the community. It feels like this is something that could actually happen, at least back in the 80s, in a small, cul-de-sac. And yeah, it's just fun after fun after fun after fun. If you have not seen The Burbs, oh my gosh, especially if you like horror comedies, you must see The Burbs. So The Burbs, my choice for the most amazing film from 1989. Now that brings me to the best so bad it's good film. Now, admittedly, I wasn't aware of this film until Joe Bob Briggs covered it on the last drive-in for his shot on VHS night, and that film is Things. Yes, I own it. Thank you to my good buddy Rich Smith who bought it for me. I immediately saw it. I fell in love with it because I love films that are awful. This film, unintentionally terrible. I wonder if it even really had a script. I'm sure anyone who's seen it would actually wonder that, because it's so meandering. The dialogue is all over the place. The main characters are potentially actually drunk, but at least drunk in the film, in the context of the actual story that's going on here. The creatures that show up in this, or the things, look terrible, but they're used in such a fun way that it definitely is one of those so bad it's good films. I am so much in love with films that just suck, and unintentionally so, and you can tell this is one of those. I mean, just look at this guy's mullet. I mean, that's your first tip-off that this is going to be amazing. Like, the cover art is your first tip-off. If you've not seen Things, I would highly recommend watching it. I would also recommend, if you have Shudder, watching the Joe Bob version of Things that he did for the last drive-in. Last season was season 3. So, wonderful, ridiculous, meandering idiocy. I love it. Things is my best so bad it's good choice for 1989. Now that takes me to the most WTF film. Now, there's another film that's one of my picks in this list that I heavily wanted to put in WTF, but I also wanted to do this one, so that's in another category. I'll talk about it when I get to it. But this film is, and this could be under the also most underrated, Society. Wonderful. I love the steelbook that I have of it. It's a beauty. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Did a review of it as well. I actually showed like some of the insides of the booklet in here, which have some very fun images. You got to check that out. But the main reason I did it for WTF is the shunting. If for anyone who's not actually seen the film, I'm not going to ruin what the shunting is, but once you get to the shunting, the first time you see the film, total WTF moment. It's one of the most WTF moments I've ever had watching a film in my lifetime. When I watched this, I don't know, 6 to 8 years ago, blew my mind, but it's also a really fun film. It feels so 80s. There's so much fun character development in the story and just fun, interesting, quirky, very quirky characters written into it. It's very over the top in such a ridiculous, fun way, and it's very WTF. I mean, really, it's only the shunting. It's only the shunting the reason that I chose this, but I think that's very well justified, and I'm sure plenty of you checking this video out would also agree. So, Society by Brian Usna, wonderful film, love it so much. My pick for most WTF of 1989. Then that brings me to Best Gore. I do not own this one for Best Gore. It is currently streaming on Shudder. I think it's still on Shudder. And that film is called Intruder. This is a film that is billed as having Bruce Campbell in it, even though Bruce Campbell's barely in the film, but does have a good amount of Ted Raimi and Sam Raimi both acting in it. And it has another Evil Dead alum, Dan Hicks, who is my favorite part of the film. The film is Intruder, and it's literally about a killer in a closed down supermarket at night. They actually shot in a supermarket, and it's very fun. I did not expect the kills in this film, especially one of them where someone's head gets basically sawed in half with one of those like meat bandsaws. Oh my goodness, I did not see that coming. There's some really good kills in this, some really amazing gore in this, and I just didn't see it coming. I think it was amazing. It's just it's a fun film in general too. It does kind of fall into like the so bad it's good category because it is kind of ridiculous. The story is basically non-existent there, to be honest. It's a big stretch, like the actual motivation for what the killer's doing. You're just like, okay, but it's quirky, it's wacky, it's ridiculous, and it's so much fun. And I really wish that Ted Raimi's character would have lived longer in this film. Sorry to kind of spoil that, but people just get picked off. I really wish his character would have lived longer, but yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people wish there was more Bruce Campbell, but all I needed in this film were the awesome kills and Dan Hicks, his performance. Phenomenal. So that's why my favorite Gore pick is, or Best Gore for 1989 is Intruder. That's a good one. Now moving to my most unique. Now this was the film that I also could have put as most WTF, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree if you've seen this film or even just know about this film. This is another one that was covered by Joe Bob Briggs in season 2 of The Last Drive-In, and that is Tetsuo Iron Man. Tetsuo the Iron Man, Japanese film. Yes, I own this film. There was a phase I went through more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe even more, close to 20 years ago, where I was buying up as much Asian cinema as I could at Best Buy because that's when they were getting in the Tokyo Shock Films and Tartan Asia Extreme, which this is a Tartan Asia Extreme release. If you have not seen this, let me just tell you what it's about. It's basically about a businessman who ends up hitting with his car someone who's a metal fetishist. They're into metal in a sexual way. After hitting them with their car, they start to turn into a metal person, in essence. And it's very sexualized, the whole film. There's some really cool stuff done in like stop motion style, which I really, really love about this film. So it's very crazy, and that's why it definitely fits in the WTF category, but I would put it more towards unique because I've never seen a film like this before. You know, the style is really frantic, and there's a lot of like crazy cuts in the film. Then you throw into it the crazy performances, you throw in the overall concept. I've never seen anyone do this before, of literally having someone change into a metal person, and the design of it is nuts. It's so frantic and there's just like random metal stuff all over the place. And there's even a giant penis drill that shows up. Like, it is a crazy film. You truly do not know where anything is going with this thing, but it's so unique. It really does need to be seen to be believed. And I think from an artistic standpoint, there was a lot achieved in this film, even though the first time you watch it, you're just like, oh, that's just insane, basically. And you kind of could write it off as just being nuts, but very good film. So that's why it is my most unique pick, Tetsuo the Iron Man. Then that brings me to the most overrated film, and it's going to be a Wes Craven film that I know a lot of people here probably are into as a So Bad It's Good film. I couldn't even get into it as So Bad It's Good. I think I have a review for it on my channel. Shocker. Shocker is ridiculous. They have the guy, forgetting his name at the moment, but the guy who plays Skinner in the X-Files series actually did a really good job with his role as Horace Pinker. A guy who goes to death row, gets electrocuted, but actually survives the electrocution and then has, like, electricity powers. But he can also then, like, go inside of televisions, which is where a lot of the craziest, weirdest sequences come from. It's shot in kind of like a fun, quirky, almost comedic style, which I think lends it to being bad, you know, and it feels very 90s. It feels very 90s, even though it's actually 80s. Because, you know, obviously 89 is kind of like right there on the cusp when things are changing over. So it feels very 90s, though, in a very bad horror film 90s kind of way. I can see where people like this as a So Bad It's Good film, but for me, it just does not hit. I just don't enjoy it. It's just so ridiculous and dumb that I just can't. Good concept. I just think the way it was executed, I'm like, ugh. I mean, Wes Craven was a master, but you can't have gold every single time, and he didn't. And I think this one really speaks to it. So that's why Shocker is my pick for most overrated for 89. Now the final category for 1989 is most underrated, and I went with a film that also was covered by Joe Bob Briggs on the last drive-in for a Christmas special. I had actually seen it prior to that and fell in love with it, I think like the year prior. It may still be on Shudder at the moment, and that is Deadly Games, also known as Dial Code Santa Claus. It's a French film that is basically adult version of Home Alone. Even though this film came out before Home Alone, and the filmmaker has said that they believe that Home Alone actually stole from them. I think there was consideration of actually bringing a lawsuit having to do with that, but it never actually happened. But if you want to see a really messed up Santa Claus, kind of like Silent Night, Deadly Night style, just go on a terrific rampage. Deadly Games is your film. If you want to see a really cool kid with a terrible hairdo, who's rich, have all these cool gadgets, and try to protect his grandfather in his mansion house that he's booby-trapped, definitely worth watching. It's shot in a really crazy, over-the-top way, so it feels ridiculous, but it's really well shot at the same time. And it's just fun. It's just super fun, and we don't get a ton, as a horror community, we don't get a ton of, you know, Christmas time period films that are super great. So once I discovered this one, I was like, oh, another one I can add to my rotation. Because, you know, after October, it seems like, you know, there's this kind of, you're getting screwed because people are trying to move past October, and they're just like, okay, it's not about horror stuff anymore. So anytime you can inject horror into one of the holidays that come after October, it makes me super happy. So when I found Deadly Games, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Christmas, so I can potentially get my wife to watch it, but it's also horror and it's fun. So that's why most underrated goes to Deadly Games for 1989. Would love to hear your thoughts on my picks and also what your picks would be, and just, you know, whatever you want to talk about horror-wise. Once again, after you've done watching, I mean, you're basically done. You've completed watching my video. Go over to Your Friendly Neighborhood Uncle Pete's channel, which is linked in my description again. Watch his video for 1989. Come back, go to my community tab, and vote there. Now, just know that when we put our final video up next week, in addition to putting the poll up for the overall who wins with that, I'm also going to put up a poll for what decade you want us to cover next. And I'm going to put 1970s, the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. And whichever one is the most popular is what we will do again. Still in collaboration with Your Friendly Neighborhood Uncle Pete. So it should be fun. But put some comments down there, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete's channel. Also hit the notification bell button on both of our channels so you know when our videos are going up, all of them, because we're putting up good stuff. But regardless, I thank you very much for taking your time to watch this video and for being invested in the series that we're doing. It's been a lot of fun. But thank you, and until next time, keep it brutal.